our first CAC meeting of November. We have a quorum present, and we will start off by approving our meeting summary. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second. Motion by Edmund, second by Dale. Is there any comments or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Schmaltz, aye.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I was voting aye, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we do have one submitted public comment for the meeting, which I'll read to you. This comes from Steve Farley, who is a RTA 1 CAC member and is a retired Arizona State Senator, whom I'm sure many of you know. Dear members of the RTA 2 Citizen Advisory Committee, I'm deeply grateful for your dedicated service to our community as you develop our next RTA transportation plan that will serve us over the next 20 plus years. As you know, the decisions you make are vital to the success of our region and all the people living here. When I served on the first RTA CAC, we had lived through 5 previous failed transportation initiatives over the course of more than 4 decades. That record of failure engendered a sense of humility that was crucial to our success at the ballot box in 2006, and the same holds true today. We cannot take a yes vote for granted. We cannot forget the lessons of RTA's history. The road forward to success with the voters of RTA 2 depends on a broad, honest, ground up and transparent process from an empowered citizen committee, not simply government officials, comprised of a diverse range of citizens with many different perspectives. You are central to that success. You must speak up with strength for what you believe our community needs, and you must be willing to compromise with others in order to find a plan that works for everyone without compromising those beliefs. And if those who are in high positions within government try to dismiss your plan, you must push back on behalf of the voters you represent who will be asked to endorse that plan. Neither you nor they nor we can afford a defeat of a top-down plan derived from an opaque process. We were 40 years in the transportation wilderness because of such plans. This must be done and can be done. In RTA 1, we CAC members were told at the beginning by government officials that the buckets of funding were fixed. Out of a $2 billion plan, 10% would be for transit, $200 million. In response, about 1/3 of our committee decided to create a transit subcommittee to examine the true needs for transit investment in our region. That subcommittee wasn't just transit fans. We included car dealers, suburban developers, and folks who were suspicious of the whole transit idea. We looked at the possibilities and developed our own plan for how much transit we needed. And in the end, Steve Christie, at the time a Chrysler dealer, now the Republican County Supervisor, was the member of that subcommittee who made the motion to increase the portion of transit to $532 million, 26%. The point here is that the buckets were not given to the CAC from on high. They were created by the citizen members of the committee on our own volition, and the entire plan was blessed by the entire committee. Once you've decided through genuine compromise on an honest, transparent, forward-looking, broad, complete plan that serves all in the region, your work is not done. You must campaign for this plan in the public arena tirelessly, never taking victory for granted. I remember Tom McGovern and I together debating the opponents sometimes 3 times a day during the run-up to RTA 1 election day. When talking with voters, you must argue in favor of projects that are important to other members, although they might not be your favorites. Those other members will be arguing in favor of the projects that are important to you, even though they may not be their favorites. This is how we win. There will be plenty of voters who will oppose any plan. Those of us who believe in infrastructure investment can only win if we compromise on a plan that works for all of us, and we work together to get that victory at the polls. Back to the plan making process in front of you. You have control over the size of and projects in the funding buckets. You have the power to work it out amongst yourselves. You are the ones who will speak to the voters. Once you have decided on your plan as a committee, your power is immense. If your advice is not taken by the RTA board or local municipalities, they may get what they want on the ballot, but the voters will reject it. And none of us can afford that outcome. Once again, this is signed by Steve Farley. He closes by saying, thank you for your service. All right, have not gotten any other comments from the public. And so we'll move on then to item number 4 on our agenda, which is some more sub-area presentations by TMC representatives. And I understand that the order will be the town of Oro Valley first, and then Pima County, followed by the Pasquayaki tribe. Does that work for you presenters? Great. Okay, so our first one up will be Paul Kiesler and Jose Rodriguez from the town of Oro Valley. You may know that Paul is the Director of Public Works and Jose is the Engineering Division Manager.
Good morning. Members of the committee. We've started off with 13 projects to be honest, and at the workshop that took place at TMP at September 15th, I think, or 16th, we whittled it down from 13 to 3 projects, and those are the ones that I really want to talk to you about right now. Is there? Okay, there's the first one. Oh, actually, there's 2 of them right there. The first one, that number 1501 Lambert Lane. That's we're proposing to widen that from Shannon Road to Rancho Sonora to 4 lanes. We actually have bike lanes. It's multimodal. We have a multi-use path during the sidewalk, and there's also some drainage structures. You can see that where we are proposing at that workshop. When we looked at this project, we said, why don't we just extend this Lambert all the way to Thornydale? And that's what you see up there. So the proposal now is from Rancho Sonora to Thornydale, Lambert Lane. The next one on the list is Shannon Road. That's from Lambert Lane to Tangerine Road, constructed 3 lanes, and it will be multimodal, which means we'll have multi-use lanes, a multi-use path, sidewalk, and drainage facility. The way it's set up right now, the north, that section between Naranja and Tangerine Road, it's undeveloped. And what I mean it's undeveloped, it's all dirt road. So there'll be a new roadway segment for Shannon Road. The next one on the list, it's not there, but should be there. It's the Naranja project, and that's from Ironwood Ridge High School to Shannon Road.
Closer.
Much better, sorry.
I'm trying to look at the screen at the same time.
You can just don't.
Oh, there you go. Sorry about that. Okay, you want me to start or do you just continue?
I think you're okay. Keep going.
Okay, the next one on the list, it's Naranja. That is from Ironwood Ridge to Shannon Road. That it's not shown on the list, but that is we want to wind that also to 3 lanes, sidewalk, multi-use lane, and multi-use path. And that's pretty much it, guys. 3 projects. Now, if you notice, well, there's not a map.
Next slide.
Was there another one? That's it.
That's it for a while. There's only 3 projects, guys.
Tell us again, Jose, the 3rd project that didn't make it onto the slide.
It's the Naranja. It's a Naranja 2 project. That's the title of it. And that's from Ironwood Ridge High School to Shannon Road.
Do you have the project number for that by chance?
1521.
Thank you.
Is that dirt right now? Not on?
No, it's actually 2 lanes. We actually widened Naranja a couple of years back. We went, it was 2 lanes, went to 3 lanes from La Troy Boulevard to Ironwood Ridge. So we want to continue that all the way down to Shannon Road. That's pretty much it, guys. 3 projects, again, 13 projects, 3 projects.
Could you-
Tell us briefly how you decided kind of that these were the 3 that would be the most important.
For the last 20, 21 years, no, all that, we've been kind of busy. We've been winding a lot of our arterials and collectors, and those, if you look at a roadway network, we're pretty much done. You'd look at La Choya Boulevard, La Cañada, La Choya Boulevard was recently constructed as part of the RTA plan. We have Tangerine Road was also an RTA plan, McGee Road. So if you look at a roadway network, we're all pretty much in good shape. We're all built out 4 lanes. That's our arterials and collectors. Our need now is centered in that same area with Shannon and Lambert Lane and Naranja. So that if you look at them, they're all clustered together and they're all going to work together. You got Lambert Lane coming in from the south and then Shannon Road to the north, and then it also ties into Naranja. Once we get to the design, what I'm really proposing, maybe do a roundabout at that intersection of Shannon and Naranja, but that'll be up to also Paul Kiesler to concur with my ideas. But yeah, that's how we came up with those 3 projects.
And have you had any outreach in the past year or so with your electorate, with the residents of Oro Valley? Any feedback, perhaps through your council or, in your master planning?
Well, you know, it's not about political, so I'll get.
So Chair, yes, we have communicated our entire list to the town council. The town council seemed to be, they didn't give us any other feedback other than thank you for those projects. However, we're very pragmatic and we understand that when it comes to pulling all the projects across the entire region with all the many jurisdictions, we really have to look inward with ourselves as well. Some of our projects were safety related. That was actually the bulk of our proposals were taking our rural 2-lane roads and making them 3-lane roads. So it wasn't completely capacity. Those were the ones that we called off the list. And we're hoping as we move into the future and we move into RTA next, that the regional funding through PAG, it becomes available again. And when that becomes available, then those will be competitive elements, or if the RTA has categorical safety, maybe those are opportunities, because at least in Oro Valley, we were rural and a little suburban. We're now urban and suburban, and we have very little rural left to us. As Mr. Rodriguez said, we're really concentrating on the area where we are still have rural roads and suburban traffic. And we've had some fatalities out there. We really need to work on the capacity. And that Shannon from Naranja to Tangerine is a major link. That's a grid link that doesn't exist today. And then of course Lambert, we had Lambert proposed originally, and then as we had the workshop, in talking with our counterparts at the county and talking with Marana, it made sense that it actually went out to Thornydale.
What is their project list? Thanks.
So anyways,
Yeah, no, we've got a few questions from members of the committee. If you would be willing to take a few questions.
Sure.
First one I have is Chris Schmaltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for the speakers to speak to, for each of the 3 projects, their regional impact or the basis of their regional significance in moving those forward.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Schmaltz.
Yes.
Yes. So as I mentioned, what we're looking at is purely grid. So this is grid network that we're looking at, and the projects that we pulled off our list were not grid network. So Tangerine, that connection from Tangerine through Shannon, through the town of Oro Valley, down into the county, that's all part of the 1 mile grid network. The short piece that's missing here on this list, which is on Naranja, again, that's a grid connection. That's kind of a choke point, and it's a very small segment that would complete the grid through that section. So again, in Oro Valley, we realize that people are not just stopping in Oro Valley. But there's a good contingent of folks going from Marana down Tangerine and then down La Cholla or down La Cañada. This makes another grid network for that. Also, the county residents out in that area as well. It's again, connecting the dots on the grid.
Just for clarity, when you say grid, you mean major boulevard?
Major, yeah, the major one, not the major 1 mile grid network throughout the urban region.
Yeah, Kevin.
Full disclosure, I live across the street from Ironwood Ridge, so I know, very familiar with this area. One suggestion I have is I think the Naranja segment's only like a quarter mile, something
It's
like
very
that.
small, yeah.
I'd probably just include it with the Shannon Road project. Especially if you decide to do something like a roundabout, by the time you tie it all in, you're gonna.
And
make that
that's our
connection
intent,
anyhow.
yeah. Thank you.
So I'd just make it clear in the, in the list that I would probably just consider that part of the Shannon project. And then secondly, Shannon from Lambert to Tangerine, I think would be great with the new 3-lane roadway, bike lanes, everything else. That's one segment where there's absolutely no bike lanes. Again, thinking more regionally, I think that should continue down to either McGee or possibly even all the way to Thornydale. That's my 2 comments.
Thank you.
And so what would, Kevin, what would your suggestion then be about the limits of that project?
1503, the Shannon.
Uh-huh.
So it'd be Shannon Road. I'd probably go all the way to Thornydale, since Thornydale was improved previously. Say Thornydale Road to Tangerine Road. 3-lane roadway with bike lanes, et cetera, et cetera.
Thornydale to Tangerine, aren't they, don't they intersect?
Shannon kind of curves around and it intersects Thornydale and then goes up and intersects McGee and then up to Tangerine.
Okay.
So it's not.
Yeah, you can tell it's not my neighborhood.
It's funny down by Tucson National is what
Yeah.
happens. What happens.
Got it. Oh, yeah, that is clogged up. Okay, question from Moss.
Thank you. So a couple questions I have a few. First off, how does increasing, as you might be familiar, one of our guiding principle has to do with climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions regionally. How does increasing the capacities of these roads reduce carbon emissions?
Sure. So as we're planning for the future, Chair, Speaker, what we're looking for is that expansion so that we don't end up with stagnant traffic. We're already starting to see a little bit of that on La Cañada. That will transfer in the future over to La Cholla. This creates another north-south regional connector on the northwest to help keep cars moving. And I think you all know as cars stagnate in traffic, that's where you're going to be getting a lot of your greenhouse gases.
Why was the solution road widenings though versus, I know, Oro Valley has been doing stuff with like main streets and trying to really, as you've described it, urbanize rather than being kind of a rural suburban area and trying to make these more connected hubs for communities and for the community and having an actual central place to go. So I'm curious why road widenings, which typically destroy kind of that whole character of communities instead of something like a transit system.
Sure. Well, with our 3 projects, the main one, which is the Shannon Road project, what it does is it actually places a road where a road does not exist today.
Mm-hmm.
That's the major impetus from Shannon north of Naranja to Tangerine. There literally is no road there. For Shannon south, that's the understanding of the going to the 3 lanes. And that's partially a safety element, partially capacity. And then going farther south, as suggested by one of your other board members here, that connectivity down to the Overton McGee area, again, that helps spread the traffic out and keep the traffic moving. And that was the major reason behind that.
So sorry, I don't think I'm not sure I heard the kind of answer to my question there. I specifically asked about transit and why that wasn't considered if congestion was a concern, especially given Oro Valley's other community goals of having these vibrant community centers that have reflect more of like a, wait, what is it? I forgot the downtown initiative, the long range planning effort, but Main Streets, I think was what it was called or something. And so just trying to understand how
Sure.
these projects relate to those community priorities.
So I'll tackle transit first. With respect to the RTA, transit is an incredibly important aspect to Oro Valley. In fact, so much so that back in, I want to say it was 2006, 2007, when the state funding from LTAP went away, which was operating Oro Valley's transit system, the community spoke very loudly that they didn't want the Oro Valley transit system just kind of rolled into the main RTA system. So we worked out back in about 2006 an agreement where Oro Valley is one of the operators of the transit element, and that's incredibly important to us. And I don't think these roads, it's not an either or with these roads, it's and if the transit element does not make it as far as RTA Next goes, that will put Oro Valley in a big bind, because that is a major amenity that's supplied to not only our residents, but our transit works with the RTA transit and spreads throughout the region. And we work hand in hand together. Now, with regard to the main streets and kind of that feeling of community center, our current electorate Main Streets is not one of their focuses. That was not a project. That was a project that was actually taken off the books with the current council that's elected.
I guess I'll just say here, it sounded very much like you were describing how important regional transit was to Oro Valley, and yet I still don't understand how these projects support more, to Chris's point, the regional center of the RTA Next and what we're required to do. And, given what you described about how it's really important for that regional connection, I just don't understand why there weren't any kind of transit projects that were submitted here, because there's no guarantee what is going to happen on the transportation element, which is a concern of mine personally. So I share that with you all. And I have one more question. Tom, I have one more.
I'll get back to you with your other points. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to mix in.
Tom, can I just finish? I'm on a sequence. We know it's going to come around, so it's fine. I think to just.
All right. Go ahead.
Continue. So there's that point. So I'll just reiterate. I don't see how the regional connection here is, or how this connects to community priorities. Just because the council has changed something doesn't mean it's not the community priority. And then you mentioned too that one of these roads is going to be brand new. And as also in our guiding principles is considerations about wildlife, connectivity, and we also know that, again, speaking to carbon emissions, that how important green space and natural environments are to helping reduce and mitigate those impacts. So I'm curious to hear what the specific actions, what are the specific design plans or strategies that will be deployed for that project to help minimize those environmental impacts. And I think that given the importance of that, we need to have specific details about things for a project, rather than it can maybe get paid for with some kind of categorical fund. So just please don't answer that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Rachel.
Tom, are you going to give an opportunity for him to answer my question?
Oh, I thought I heard you say, don't answer that.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was saying don't answer the way of saying, if there are categoricals to address environmental effects.
Yeah, so Chair, Speaker. So with respect to environmental crossings, we do not have engineered plans on this. So that's all part of the process of going through the DCR and then going ahead and coming up with what are the studies, what are the environmental impacts, and of course that will be studied. And if there are environmental corridors, I know the wildlife element is an important element the current RTA. I imagine it's going to be an important element of the future RTA as well. So I see that being incorporated. With respect to the lessening of greenhouse gases and emissions, we're looking at not just a vehicular corridor, but a multimodal corridor as well. That's the best I can answer your question.
I also would like to say, though, that requirements, basic requirements like sidewalks and such that we have to have because of for ADA compliance and all projects, you know, I just want to make clear that that's not like a above and beyond that this project is doing to help address our guiding principles. That would be regardless of whether or not it receives RTA funding. So just make that very clear to our committee.
Okay, thank you. Rachel?
Yes, hi. This list of projects seems hyper local and small enough that it could be funded by other sources. Have you looked for other sources of funding for this rather than the RTA?
Well, the speaker, chair, the reason that we looked at RTA next is because we feel that these are indeed regional, of regional significance. Because again, that's why we pulled our projects back to only be on the major grid system, because it's not just transportation for Oro Valley, it's transportation for the Northwest region. This connectivity for the new street from Naranja to Tangerine, it's going to alleviate and create a better circulation pattern for Ironwood High School, which has more than a singular jurisdiction that attends it. And our feeling was that these were of regional significance. With respect to the local jurisdiction funding it, I can say that the construction of the new road is not within our means. We are not a jurisdiction that receives enough HERF. We do not have a property tax, so we do not have the means to be able to build at least the main segment of the Shannon Road. Now, with respect to the southern part of Shannon, that could be, but that would be short-sighted on our part, just ending at the Oro Valley limits. That's why we look at this as also regional. And then Lambert Lane has kind of the same argument. We can do our small section, but again, we look at the regional significance of this. That's why we brought it up in the workshop, and that's why we would suggest it moving further.
Very good. Bruce?
Yeah, I just have a question. Kevin made two suggestions. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for taking it from 13 to 3. Appreciate that. Two suggestions were made. Do you see those as logical changes? And would you be willing to resubmit the one as a combined and then add the addition to that?
Chair, Speaker, absolutely. And that's why we when we looked at that whole region, Shannon that's already built, Shannon that's not built, and then that Tangerine or that Naranja piece, that's all one. That really is all one functional element, and we'd be happy to do that.
Richard, I just maybe suggest we pursue that, or at least footnote it, so when we get to those projects, we understand that suggestion.
That they're connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Did I see, Dale, did you have a?
Bruce just took care of what I wanted to say. I also wanted to thank you for cutting it down to 3.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Oh, Moss, you wanted one follow-up?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I agree. Thanks so much for whittling this down to 3 projects. It makes it easier on us. One last question. You mentioned something about Oro Valley not having the means to pay for this. And it sounds like the biggest connection is also to Marana. My understanding, I think, is that Oro Valley still relies on sales tax to fund most of government actions. Has there been any, if funding for your community and more community specific projects has been constrained, has there been any action to, pass a different type of tax for your community to help fund your local projects rather than using regional dollars?
Chair, Speaker, no.
I would think this would be your tax increase. RTA.
Yes.
Regional.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that would rely on regional dollars that the majority of the other people would pay for rather than Oro Valley residents.
So it's the whole point of the RTA. We're regional. So we're going to raise money. Everyone gets a piece of the pot. They're asking for their projects. That's what we're looking at today. So this is their tax increase.
If I may, Chair and Speaker, the citizenry of Oro Valley will be contributing to this as well. So I do not believe that we are asking for an unfair share of the amount of regional taxes that we generated, regardless of what that end amount ends up being.
I was just thinking too, because of the city of Tucson recently passed that 411, it's specific to the city limits and really focuses on more local street improvements, which it sounds kind of a lot of what this is. So I don't, so just as a counter offer of like what that could look like for rather than asking regional taxpayers to, I understand the concept of the RTA next. It's just trying to get at the point of
Yeah.
what are we spending is with the regional intentions.
Yeah, we understand. And in the interest of moving us along, want to thank Jose and do you want to add some?
Well, I do want to, I think the chair, if I may, just for a moment, and the speaker brought up an important aspect with regard to why did Oro Valley not submit transit? Is because transit wasn't part of the consideration for the projects to be submitted at this point. I want to let the board know that transit is an incredibly important element for the town of Oro Valley. And if there's anything that we would look at from RTA next, that'd probably be one of the highest elements that we have, even over and above the roadways. So because the roadways, again, if RTA next doesn't happen, there's still 12.6 funding that would ultimately be available through the PAG process. But the reason that we did not submit transit at this point is only because of what's been asked to be submitted at this point. We would wholeheartedly support and endorse any and every transit element.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
gosh, thanks so much for telling us that. I was under the impression these were the final project lists. So thanks for that clarification.
Yeah. Of course, we only received 2 transit projects overall, 2 very, major regional projects. So you're right about that. That's exactly where we would expect to have the input of, increased service and extended routes and extended times and all that, that would enhance your current transit help. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Sean, you had your hand up. Is there something else you wanted to add?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Just for the Oro Valley, this one question I had is regarding, with the funding source. Sorry about that. With the funding source, is there any, sorry. Is there any opportunity for using impact fees?
Yeah, so Chair, Speaker, yes, we would of course contribute whatever fair share we could through our impact fees. And we've always done that with both RTA and PAG projects. We always make a commitment. So we're prepared to make that commitment as well for whatever we have within our accounts.
Great, thanks, Paul. Thanks. Appreciate it very much. If you have any last statements for us, if not, I'm sure we'll be in touch with more questions and follow up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board, for the opportunity just to present.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay, our next presenter is Catherine Skinner, the Director of Transportation for Pima County. And I believe we have several projects listed. Let's see, was this? This starts out with in the northwest sub area, I guess, is what ours are showing. Is that the order you wanted to present in, Catherine?
Let me know if I'll hold it. It's easier here. Okay.
I'm afraid it's just not quite working unless you hold it.
Okay. I'm actually, if possible, I'd like to just give a little introduction and then we can go in whatever order the slides are in. So again, I'd like to thank all of you on the CAC for having me once again to speak. I'm Catherine Skinner. I'm the Director of Transportation. I've been here a couple other times in my Deputy Director role, but I'm excited to be in this role. And I'd like to thank you all for the amazing amount of time you guys have dedicated to this really thoughtful work. I know that it is hard work because it's hard work on our our part as well. So first I just want to walk you through how we came up with our proposal originally. These projects were submitted in early 2020, and we began the effort of developing them before the pandemic had hit. We did have public outreach at that time, trying to gain the interest and understand what our community wanted from this plan. So our original submittal, although we do have named projects which were requested, we did speak to the importance of the categorical projects. And for unincorporated Pima County, we kind of are everywhere. Obviously, we're the entire county, but we're representing, you know, communities on the east side of town with Vail and Corona de Tucson, the foothills, Catalina. On the west side of town, we have some really congested areas, Valencia Road, west of Mission. We go all the way out to Ajo, we're on Mount Lemon. So, you know, we very much understand that there are not one size fits all solutions to the transportation issues that we're dealing with in the county. And so that's what we were mindful of when we were putting forth our submittal. The categories that are really important to us, and I know you're discussing those in other venues, but I think it's important to mention them. They are transit, all-weather roadways. So just fun fact, we had over 100 road closures this past monsoon season. These types of fixes can be standalone projects that are not so much a capital project improving an entire length of roadway. They can very much be little standalone projects. So we thought it was conducive to a categorical. Livable streets, you could call it complete streets, call it what you will. It is taking a focus to the human scale transportation network that is around us. That is an important part of our transportation network, especially in certain pockets of the community that more densely populated. We also put technology in there. I said it the very first time I talked to you all. When we came up with the first RTA plan, there was not an iPhone. And today we do all of our transportation with our phone in hand, whether you're calling an Uber or you're just getting directions or you're paying for parking downtown. This is an important thing that we have to consider. And there's a lot of transportation solutions that are out there for us if we invest in them. And it takes, you know, thoughtful consideration to invest in that technology. Pavement preservation. So that's another one that we put in as a categorical. It's something that all of us that have aging infrastructure are facing. The county has been investing tens of millions of dollars over these past few years, and we're going to continue to do so for the years to come. But as a region and the way Arizona funding for transportation works, this is something that we need to always be mindful of, is maintaining this infrastructure we have here. It's something that really sets the stage for what people think of our transportation network when they come here. So let's invest in that as well. Then on to our named projects. We had 21 named projects. They were primarily based upon either capacity needs, so the volume on these roadways were already exceeding the capacity of the roadways, or there were multimodal needs that were not addressed. They were deficient, you know, sidewalks, bike lanes, transit, there was some deficiency. The important thing to keep in mind with these projects, and I think we're experiencing it as we have these conversations, is the need for flexibility. So what we think is going to be the right solution right now, today, November of 2022, I guess we're in now, may not be what we want when we're going to build this in November of 2032. We need to be mindful of being context sensitivity at the time that we're going to do this work, thinking about what our planners and our engineers and our technicians recommend as the appropriate fixes for the context we live in. And, you know, some of these projects, I will say that we'll get to, represent very long-standing needs that we have not been able to fix or address with either the 1997 bond program that was ongoing for a long time. And, you know, Broadway just had their dedication a couple of weeks ago. That was a bond project. We haven't been able to find the investment on some of these. So that would be like a Valencia Road from Mission to Cardinal. That is a need that has been there for many years and will continue to be there until we find regional funding to make that connection. And so in each of these projects, you know, although we mostly call them widening projects or capacity projects, we completely would expect that we would build all the infrastructure needed. So it would be inclusive of bicycle and pedestrian access, drainage is needed, landscaping, the public arts. We're building that complete street for this corridor. So initially we did a prioritization that was presented to TMC that spoke only to volume and capacity ratings. Then we went back to the drawing board and we looked at more of the different criteria. We tried to bring in some of the criteria that have to do with social equity, because that's an important part. That's what we're seeing in all of the federal legislation. It's important to be mindful of how we're spreading these projects out. So we went back, revisited that prioritization. I'd be glad to share it in detail, but I know in the interest of time, I think it would be better to transition to the projects that you guys are looking at on your screen. This is what came out of our TMC exercise. We did not reduce our project list as much as Oro Valley did. It did not go from 13 to 3, but we're kind of in every single area. So that's to be expected. So on your screen, Ina Road. I should have prefaced this with our original submittal as well. When we submitted the scope for these projects, we just took it in the unincorporated areas. There was a limited amount of money we were allowed to submit projects for. And being that we are everywhere in the county, we felt it was important to be really judicious about that. And we cut it off there with the anticipation that there would be coordination at a table like this, at a TMC workshop, that would come up with more logical termini for these projects. So this first project was the Ina Road, Cañada del Oro to Paseo del Norte project. After our conversation, we did talk about extending it all the way from Oracle Road over to the I-10. There was some discussion as well, First Avenue. That's a very large project if you take it that long, but it probably would be useful. Linda Vista, Marana Town limits to Thornydale Road. After we had the conversation, we extended it up north all the way to Twin Peaks, because that, again, we were cutting it off at kind of an illogical termini. This would create another great corridor. Thornydale, Cortero to Camino del Norte, we extended to Tangerine. So all three of those, because of the value of the TMC workshop, we were able to make them more of a regional project. These are all roads I think we're familiar with, even if we don't live in these parts of town, because they are the connectors that provide the regional mobility. So that was Northwest. You want to go to so Southeast, we have a few projects left there. So one of the growing areas of town, which if anybody's been out there, is Vail. We have a lot of the congestion that happens when you have not had enough funds to grow the roadways as quickly as the houses have been built. So that's really what these projects are speaking to. Colossal Cave Road 1 and 2 really could be combined into a singular project that, along with the Marianne Cleveland Way. If you're familiar with that area, they kind of merge into each other. Colossal Cave connects down to the I-10, and then Marianne Cleveland turns into Colossal Cave, and it's kind of an east-west road. There's a lot of challenges with this corridor, and it also is hops into the city of Tucson for a bit there. There's a double track railroad with these very frequent crossings right in the middle of kind of the town center of Vail, really, and in between some of their major schools that causes constant congestion. It's something that needs major transportation investment.
Catherine, a quick question. Or if you don't mind us interrupting a little bit as you're going, because I know you have the whole county covered.
By all means.
It might be helpful for us to kind of ask local questions, if you will, but you had Palo Verde as a fairly high priority. And I'm not seeing it here in the Southeast. Anything happen with that project?
So right there. So
There's the answer.
I will say, that is one that we do feel strongly is a roadway improvement project. It does not deal with a problem when it comes to congestion with single occupancy vehicles. It is a major transit connector, pedestrian, bicycle route. It is next to the Center of Hope, where the governor was in town talking about the importance of that. And unfortunately, you know, it is extremely costly to add on things like sidewalk or extend drainage structures in the middle of a developed area. You know, you're dealing with right of way on both sides. You're dealing with a lot of existing utilities. It becomes much more expensive, as I'm sure we've all seen with the City of Tucson projects. So this is one of those that it is really serving a need that community needs that may look different than what the project looks like in some of the outskirts.
Great, thanks for that
That
explanation.
expense, would you be pulling it off? Would you pull it off the list because of the expense with the infrastructure? Or is that something you guys bond later? Like, and if you look 20 years from now in our community, you're gonna have to improve this area at some point. So how does it get done?
So that's a good question. I mean, we are still pursuing different federal grant opportunities to provide the improvements we need. So, you know, we went after a Regional Transportation Alternatives grant and are gonna be able to provide a small amount of sidewalk with that. We've gone to HSIP, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Program, because we have a number of fatalities, to try to get a hawk built in that corridor. So basically you piecemeal it. I mean, that there's really not another good option. So by putting it in a plan like this, you can get all of it at once. And although, you know, we may feel like eventually it'll need to grow, the traffic projections right now didn't indicate that vehicular traffic would become an issue.
Very good. I see Mel Cohen.
Yes, and I had, thank you for the opportunity and thank you all for participating. How much in the planning do you consider where people live, where they work, and where they're going to play? And what is the vision for the next 20 years that you have overall for the county as you present these?
Great question. Thank you, Chair and Mel. So the Department of Transportation's vision is to enhance the roadway users' mobility and improve the overall multimodal transportation network. So that's very big picture, you know, goals. We use a number of different methods to do it. So in terms of where the growth areas are going to be, you know, we do work closely with PAG because these things all kind of have to interconnect through our RMAP and other planning efforts. So we look at that. We also balance out where we're actually seeing a lot of that residential growth, and we can look at that on a month-by-month basis based on the impact fee revenues we collect and what benefit area those are falling in. So we look at that. One of the important things, and I should have, thank you for asking the question, is we want to look at the supply side and the demand side solutions for a problem. So what does that mean? Supply side is growing that roadway, adding those extra lanes, doing those major infrastructure improvements. And the demand side is, how do we change our behaviors when it comes to the roadway? How do we make them work better for all of us that are using them? That's that technology piece quite often. Quite often there's a lot of infrastructure that is tied into that technology to make it work. So a signal is not going to just work the same if it's just out on its own, not connected to a network, as if you have everything speaking to each other. I think there's a lot of benefits in our region with as few jurisdictions as we have to really make significant gains in the area of technology and connected traffic signals and routing systems, because it's just fewer people to coordinate between. And I think we always need to take advantage of where we have opportunities for big success, where, you know, our smaller size is really working to our benefit.
Yeah, and following Kevin's lead, I'm just going to disclose that I've been advising a group of people in Vail that are looking to incorporate as a town. For that reason, I have a lot of familiarity with the previous three projects that you were talking about. And I just wanted to underscore a couple of things that you said. First was, there is explosive growth in Vail right now. I mean, the number of homes being added is almost overwhelming. The three projects, as you noted, really are not separate discrete projects. If you built one of them, you'd just create more of a congestion problem. So I would urge us to look at those as a series of related projects. And then the city of Tucson also has proposed a small segment of road on Marion Cleveland that goes from Houghton Road up to where these projects. So I would just urge the committee to consider looking at those projects as a group and not just as separate discrete projects.
Yeah, I very much agree. You know, it would be a phased approach. Probably it's too big of a scale to do all at once, but they need to be planned and delivered with one mindset.
Thank you.
Number one, as a longtime Tucsonan who's focused on the east side of town, I'm married to the daughter of former chief ranger of Soar National Park.
Hey, Dale, speak up a little closer to the mic, please.
Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm familiar with this whole area. My parents owned and operated a restaurant called Soar Carter's, Spanish Trail and Escalante Road for 50 years. Very familiar with this, and I second what Bruce just said about that development. Also want to emphasize something. My grandfather, in 1951 or 52, something like that, actually was under the old county $1,000 per mile paved road program, paid for the first pavement on Spanish Trail. And there's two edges to that. One is, as we used to joke, you put a grader behind a cow and you followed it along to create Spanish Trail. But as a practical matter, what it was graded through oil and gravel up. And not only these roads out there, but the roads, the Palo Verde project, those roads have never been, as I understand, rebuilt with proper subbase, proper drainage, and those are all parts of the need to redevelop those roads. And you know, and I, as someone who's driven Spanish Trail, there's surely in these areas there are water crossings, et cetera, that are issues. So I very much support what Bruce is saying. I also am very well aware of the overall budget and that there's a limit on how far we can go. And having known a lot of people out in that area, they're going to want to go farther than we're probably talking about. And as a practical matter, we have to work for a proper compromise on this. And I like what you're saying. I like what Bruce is saying. Those are proper limits to deal with the growth that's out there, but not all of it. It can't all happen at one time. So,
Thank you.
We get a couple more questions. Sorry to interrupt you in the middle, but this may be a little more efficient. Not sure yet. Mel, your hand is still up. Did you have a follow-up?
No, sorry, I should have lowered it. Thank you.
All right, Patricia.
Hi, thank you. I would just love to hear a little bit more about, other than technology, what types of multimodal considerations are being included in these project plans, like sidewalks, bike lanes, all of those types of things. And then as these are probably going to be, larger connectors, like will these options be protected as is recommended for bike lanes on, larger roads? Just with mind to, our updated guiding principles. And as you've stated, the desire to sort of walk back the focus on capacity and consider social equity and things like that. Just would love to hear a little bit more about that aspect and how we could ensure that those pieces would remain in the projects until completion and not be, value engineered out or whatever. Like, how integral are they to the planning?
That's a great question. I will definitely admit we have not gone through major planning efforts with any of these proposals. They are based upon either the performance measures that we know, what we heard through different community outreach events and whatnot. However, I will speak to what we look for when we're actually moving forward to determine specific scope items on a project. And you spoke of protected infrastructure and the different types of infrastructure. That's something we're looking at in our revising our roadway design manual. And that is that depending on the classification of a roadway, if you're talking about a Houghton Road where you have very high speed drivers, it's not conducive necessarily to having a sidewalk right next to the curb. It's not conducive to having bicycle infrastructure right next to that 55-mile-per-hour vehicle. And so we are looking at revising our typical sections. We're taking a lot of insight from the city's new manual of complete streets. They have a whole slew of different typical sections that really are reflective of the type of infrastructure, where you are, the speeds, the access on either side, who do we think are going to be using these facilities? And we're going to be mindful of that when we're really coming up with the specific scope items for these projects.
If I could insert just for a moment, I want to remind most of the members of the committee, and perhaps for the first time some of the newer members, that about a year and a half ago, I believe, we had a presentation from the some communication from the Southeast Regional Council that kind of represents the Vail area. That group was supportive of these projects, certainly as very high priority. Perhaps you could also tell us, as we maybe get into a different area, maybe the South area, because we had also heard presentations from the Green Valley Coordinating Council. And I didn't really see any projects from the Green Valley directed from the Green Valley area. But I'll leave that whenever it's appropriate for you to talk this about. Last question before we let you move on to the next area. That's Vermont.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks for this, Catherine. I just want to first say that I appreciate, I think you're one of the first presenters that's talked about social equity and looking towards the direction that the federal government has given us or is setting as far as priorities, and for looking at the city of Tucson's work with Complete Streets and trying to think about how to integrate that at the county level. I have one question and I guess a question comment. As we just heard from Oro Valley, was Pima County also under the impression that they should only submit named roadway projects at this point?
Yeah, I believe that was the request that came to us, was for roadway projects. And
okay,
that's where we put, a transportation plan is really challenging to look at from just the lens of roadway expansion, because like I said, one size fits all solutions are not always conducive to a corridor project. Sometimes they're more smaller scale improvements. So that's why we felt it was important to touch on the full scope of needs that we really see this community needing, or at least the unincorporated portions of the county.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for providing those categorical kind of ideas for where you're going. I just want to reiterate that I have been very strongly under the impression this entire time that this was the list for named projects that we would be getting, and there wasn't going to be a revised list that incorporated named projects and, for transit or something else. So Tom, I would love for us to circle back on that point and get clarity on when we might see those projects, as it's going to be very important for our discussions. And then I also need to kind of circle back to this other point of, I just have some concerns about the reasoning that communities can't afford certain projects because, especially in kind of the more suburban, rural areas of our county, in part because areas like that are growing because of low tax rates. Property tax isn't a thing in Oro Valley, and I know Vail is unincorporated, and there's certain benefits to that as far as tax, and so there's a reason why people are going there. So I guess I'm just having concern for voters that might be they want to look at the RTA next and are wondering why their community, they're incorporated, they're paying different types of taxes in certain ways, and then still footing the bill to pay for communities and projects that they can't fund because they're not taxing the residents to basically up their government function. So I just have, this is going to be a resounding issue for me, I think, going through this process, and just need to better understand how, if we're going to do these types of things, how it's going to actually transform the region and really connect to our regional guiding principles.
Yeah, and you have to be careful, Ross, not to walk down the path of punishing communities who perhaps don't have their own local their own local sales tax for this. There are a lot of reasons that go into how communities decide to pay for the work that they. Many of them work best in the region, which is exactly why we want to care.
I appreciate that, and I'll add the other side of that too. Of it's also hard to ask communities that are paying at a higher tax rate, adding on tax on top of that, to then pay for these other bills. And so I just think that I hear you loud and clear, Tom, but there's also a flip side to that as well for the communities that pay a higher proportion of sales tax for this plan.
And I think, Moss, you have a valid point, and taxation is always a concern to ensure that it's really not our job as the RTA Citizen Action Committee. I mean, so I was on the original CAC, and it's funny, it's years later, but we have the same issue we had back then, which is we are really far behind. We tried to pass this RTA Citizen Action Committee, as all of you know, for decades, and it failed and it failed. We got too much into the weeds. We fought each other too much. It failed. We finally passed it. And now that we've passed it and we're finishing the first round, we're so far behind. So at this point, this comes down to traffic density, growing population, traffic flow right now, what the capacity needs are. I get it on the multimodal piece, but I think we all need to get out of the weeds a little bit and just stick to what we can approve for the folks that are presenting to us so we can move forward and pass this thing again.
I guess I'd also add that we are here right now talking about the named projects. We are going to talk about all the other categoricals as well. So I know we want to solve all of it right here, but it's just not really feasible or appropriate, frankly, for us to do that. We need to keep track of what our guiding principles, what our goals are. And that's a part of what will be in our next item on the agenda to talk about how we do that. But just to clarify, we are here for those named projects. Farhad.
Mr. Chair, just to piggyback on what was just said, RTA is a taxing district countywide. It's the entire county. We don't distinguish any difference between any areas. The entire county is paying into the RTA tax.
Bruce.
Yeah, and I'd just like to amplify Farhad's comments too, because state shared revenues in terms of CURP and BLT are apportioned out by population to incorporated areas. Even though those unincorporated areas pay those taxes, they're not seeing that designated funding into those incorporated areas. So to suggest that the folks in unincorporated areas aren't paying a portion of the tax that's available for transportation is not complete.
I will say, though, that I think that there's a lot of, I guess I'll push back on the idea that this is in the weeds and not too relevant to our discussions, because, you know, one thing we've never done is gone to our communities and ask, what do they think of RTA 1, and trying to use that feedback to then, you know, make improvements and address those concerns to ensure that, you know, as I think Steve Farley put it really well, like, we need this. I'm fully on board with needing regional planning and regional transportation planning. But if we're not developing a plan that has any kind of public feedback and isn't considering the shortfalls of the original the RTA 1, then and as we've seen it, there has been and it's all the mess we've been seeing for the last year or two with City of Tucson projects. This is a perception that we need to address, and we need to be open with and talking about, and not dismissing it as weedsies and irrelevant. You know, part of the reason I think we're so behind is the board hasn't even given us, you know, has just given us the budget that we have. So there's certain things that have been out of our control that, you know, it's not, these are relevant things. And if we actually want this thing to pass when it gets to the ballot, and, you know, as I think Steve said, he put it very well, of, you know, people might get what they want on the ballot, but then it won't pass. And we need to be really thinking about that piece of it as well. And again, we understand where voters live and we're the mass proportion of it, and we have to be cognizant of that and really be thoughtful in what we're putting forward.
Great points, and that's the job of the local government, not the CAC.
Okay, Rachel.
Thank you. Yes. I just wanted to circle back to something Moss brought up that I think is very important, that I was under the impression that these were all the projects, and to now learn that transit are going to be coming to us in a different list, I guess. After the RTA board just last week made a budget, how did they make a budget without knowing what the priorities were? And it seems that the transit should have been included with the roadway projects so that different constituent areas can talk about, well, yeah, as far as roadway projects, these are our priorities, but our priority, if, for example, as Oro Valley says, our priority is transit, we're not seeing that. So how can the RTA board possibly create a budget without knowing that Oro Valley has a transit priority? I'm just very frustrated by the inability to get some clarity on this. And I feel like transit is getting the short end of the stick.
Well, the transit hasn't gotten either end of the stick yet because it just hasn't come up on our plate yet. We can't do everything all at one time. And as I've alluded, as I've analogized previously, we are very much trying to change a flat tire while the car is still running, still moving. And we'll get to those items. We've already started restarted our transit subcommittee, who will really get into the projects and the needs of transit throughout the community. It's so important that it is on its own in our setup here for the RTA 1 as well as for RTA Next. So we're not disregarding it. We just haven't quite gotten there yet. And we can, as we talk to each of these transportation leaders, we can ask where their priorities are for that. But remember,
I'm sorry, it's just, yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, but somehow the RTA board has set the budget already.
No, they haven't set a budget for transit. Okay, Eva.
Yes, hi. Yeah. So per transit, I did see some transit projects on the list that we were asked to rank. So I'm not 100% again unclear about when we're going to see all the projects. I thought we were seeing all of them, including the transit projects. Also, the transit subcommittee, how often are they meeting? If it's part of their job is to do a deep dive into the transit part of the equation. And just finally, I wanted to say thank you to everybody who waits their turn to be called on with their hand up, because it takes a while to, respect everybody's turn and everybody who has their hand up. Just one last thing to echo what's been said. I don't think it's a matter of the CAC wanting to punish sprawling communities that don't have certain kinds of taxes for their roads. I mean, I don't think it's a matter of punishment, but rather a matter of trying to think about ways that we can influence, encouraging density, infill, et cetera, as a way to combat our dependency on fossil fuels, which is killing our planet. And I think that it is very much the job of the CAC, because the job of the CAC is selling the package to voters. And I do very much believe that voters are quite concerned about how we are encouraging driving and carbon emissions, and how we're not really taking seriously where we are for that. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Last comment before I promise we'll move on to the rest of your presentation, Catherine, is from Mel. Yeah, promises, promises.
Thank you. This is on transit because I, with you, attended the subcommittee and there was no information. And so therefore, I'm unclear with the resources that I know exist in this community. Who's going to present us alternatives and visions on transit? I have to express my total frustration in attending that subcommittee.
Right. Thank you, Mel. Catherine. Any idea where you were half an hour ago?
No, I was gonna say, let's turn to the next slide and I'll find out where I am.
Start
I
over.
think we covered this one.
Yes.
So the south sub area. So the three projects in this area, so the Houghton Road, Andrada Polytechnic High School to Camino del Toro. This is both the widening of a roadway, but also most importantly, making it all weather. So the county is just wrapping up a project that took it from I-10 down to this high school area as a 4-lane facility, all weather. Very costly with the number of wash crossings along here. And this is one that we called out separately. We didn't think that it was a good candidate to just be an all-weather improvement because one, it is needed connectivity to the community of Corona de Tucson. But two, the wash crossings, because of the braided nature of the watershed there, they just flow one into another, into another, into another. So you can't really do really clean standalone projects there. So that's one, the Houghton Road project. Harrison Road, I-10 to the Southeast Employment and Logistics Center. This is providing enhanced roadway connections over to the fairground area, which is similar to what Houghton Road will do. It's just on the other side and connecting up to I-10. And then Sonoran Corridor. When we put in our submittal for this, obviously we would have used all of the allotment for the unincorporated county if we really put the full value, plus the tier 1 wasn't done at that point. So we just put it in as an acknowledgement of an effort that we as a region have been working on for many, many years. And it's an important conversation piece and something we should prioritize looking into RTA next. And so this is some funding to begin that right-of-way acquisition. Again, we would not be able to construct the whole thing without using all of the funding from an RTA next. So that wouldn't be appropriate. This is something we have to think about over the course of many, many years, how we might implement this. Yes.
Catherine, so that changes from what's on your list before, from a new limited access roadway to now just the right of way.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay, so that one's changed, and then I'm going to go back to the chair's issue or question before, when the Green Valley Community the coordinating council came in, we suggested they meet with Pima County to go over their projects. I guess my question is, did they, and are you considering any of the requests that they had from down south?
So we meet with the GVC and the Traffic and Arroyos Committee all the time. We send representatives down. So we're in constant communication with them in terms of what their project needs are. Many of the projects that they put forth, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the list with me, we did feel were more conducive to potentially categorical type funding. They were not major roadway expansion, either for vehicles or from some missing scope. So they were more isolated projects or trail type connection projects is what our interpretation of it had been. And so that's why they did not appear on our submittal.
Okay, so just to follow up, so for the ones that you do consider regional, you will be presenting that in terms of categorical when we're talking about that?
If there's that opportunity, we can kind of pull together those projects. One of the valuable pieces of having a categorical program is that we don't know what all the needs are today, and it provides us an opportunity in 10 years or 15 years to put forth the project that we need at that time. And so that's, we don't have a fully defined list of projects for each category. You know, to the transit point, we know transit is important. It doesn't mean that we have identified a new route that we want, or a, you know, bus rapid transit along a certain corridor. It just means a commitment to transit, which is a very expensive component of our transportation system. And we can always look at how we improve so we have shorter headways, which can encourage more people to use the transit system.
Yeah, I agree, but the last point there is that categoricals are definitionally flexible, which is what a lot of people are talking about now. But I believe that voters, instead of just an amount of money, would like to see some of the kind of the headlighted, you know, projects under there, so they know what they're getting when we talk about sidewalks, or at least have an idea it's going to get done. And if there are priorities, perhaps they should be in there. And it may affect the funding amount as well when we see how much need is out there from all the jurisdictions.
I think that's a very valid point. And I think we have one from the south sub area. We had included Sahuarita Road from Sahuarita all the way over to the Houghton SR 83 area, needing all weather improvements. Because that is in the same watershed, of course, as Houghton. A lot of closures during our storm events. I know after the TMC workshop, that was one that was thought, well, perhaps it has a better home elsewhere. So I don't believe it made it onto this list, but that would be one where we could really quantify some of the costs related to it to help kind of gauge the piece of the pie. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just to clarify, and Farhad can fill us in on more of these specific details of what was actually approved by the voters. So in some of those categoricals, there was a fair amount of detail. Transit is a good example where portions of the transit bucket, if you will, were devoted to evening and weekend and frequency and other aspects, other components of transit in general. And that allowed, I think, the voters to understand that if it's not a specific project, it's a type of project, and it's very detailed. We had 200 bus pullouts, I think, that were in ADA improvements and those kinds of things that were defined in enough detail, I think, that although you may not know when the one in front of your house was going to be done, you knew that there were a lot of them that would be able to be undertaken as a result. Brad, do you want to add anything?
Yeah,
to that?
the only thing I would add, Mr. Chair, is that obviously as part of that conversation, once there's a draft plan, the RTA board is going to be able to define some of these additional information, both as part of the campaign outreach as well as in the administrative code. The administrative code is much more detailed. It has all that information in there. So that comes later after there's a draft plan, but definitely that is the goal, to educate the voters when the time comes so they know what they're voting on.
Bruce.
Yeah, just addressing the last two, the Harrison Road, Southeast Employment Center and the Sonoran Corridor. These are two really important parts of the long-term regional economic development strategy. And it seems unlikely that we're probably going to be able to provide any significant funding for these projects with our recommendations. But I would hope that the CAC has the opportunity as part of its recommendations, both to the voters and to the RTA board and the legislature and the congressional delegation, to say there are additional high priority projects which are very important to the region, and we would direct or advise that they find additional federal and state funding sources for these kinds of projects. I just hate to have us gloss them over and not underscore their importance to the overall transportation system. So.
Yeah.
If I may, Mr. Chair, thank you. Great comment. As you know, and hopefully majority of the folks involved know that that is a legislatively identified high priority project, both at the state level as well as at the federal level. So we'll continue to educate people about that. There was most recently state funding set aside for the next phase of the project. So that goes back to the education component. And I think if you all choose to set aside any funding for it, that's part of the story as well.
my concern is that it just doesn't drop off the table as not being something important, because as we know, keeping the fire at the feet of the legislature, or the congressional delegation, or the ADOT Transportation Board, there's lots of competition for that money. And I just think I don't want to see that get lost in the process, because I think they are very significant projects.
I agree. Again, I hope that would be part of the story that you will all tell at that time.
Dale.
Just a quick comment following up on what Bruce said. I'm aware, at least my understanding is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that the Harrison Road project basically accesses the west side of the fairground area, and it accesses a piece of land that had been set aside by the county to be developed into larger industrial sites. And one of the major shortcomings we have in industrial sites is we got a lot of smaller industrial sites, but we don't have some of those larger little larger section industrial sites available in Peter County. So it would open up on part of the infrastructure necessary for the development of those larger industrial sites. And so I think that that's a interesting, unique project.
Yes, and you're correct. That is one of our focus economic development areas. And so this would be a natural driveway into it, you know, a secondary access.
Moss.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I appreciate Carolyn's comments about having a better sense of what are inside the categoricals. And I also appreciate just having that this is getting tied to the flexibility that we know we need to have in the next plan, and how important those categoricals are going to be. And it's becoming clearer and clearer that I think we need to spend a lot more time on discussing those aspects, because to date we really haven't touched them before we go too far down with these named projects. And I know I've heard from this team, or from some members of this team, that the belief that named projects are really important for voters. But I think, as we all know, and I think not voters aren't going through and reading every one of us. Maybe if they're as nerdy as we are, they are doing that. But I think a good example, like one, I don't think everybody read that in RTA 1, but another example is the Reed Park situation, where people were unclear about what was actually written into the proposal. People see a general statement about investment in transportation, that's what they're looking at. And I think what we're hearing a lot of is a good strong cases for the emphasis on categoricals for that flexibility. Yes, some named projects should be there, but I think we need to be having more thoughtful conversations about how we're balancing everything out and what our priorities are coming into. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rachel.
Yes, hi. That's exactly what I was getting at when I was talking about the budget being set. It's true, the exact transit budget hasn't been set, but the buckets for the categories have, and we know the roadway budget, and then the other three categories are kind of lumped into one. And the RTA board made that decision without looking at any of the transit projects, besides which the RTA board just assumed that the categories from last time from RTA 1 are okay. And we in this committee have never discussed those categories. And maybe we want different ones. Maybe we want them to be organized differently. And I really want to visit that and talk about those categories.
Okay, we will. Catherine.
Okay, next slide. So the southwest area, which I've already alluded to somewhat. I'll start with the bottom project because that's really our highest priority project right now. And that's Valencia Road, Mission Road to Camino de Oeste. That would be an expansion to a 6-lane facility and modernization, including the sidewalks and the bicycle infrastructure that's necessary. And for those of you that are maybe less familiar with that part of town, Valencia Road has been developments along Valencia Road all the way from Mission over to Ajo Highway. It's just been growing about as fast as the Vail area in terms of growth. And it is another area that doesn't have a very well connected roadway network. So that's really what we're highlighting with this. So Valencia is kind of our top priority of this grouping. We also put on Drexel, which is to, again, improve and modernize that roadway. You know, the city also has a lot of improvements along Drexel. So I think in terms of giving it one cohesive appeal in terms of what that infrastructure scoping looks like, I think it's always very important to be mindful of the fact that the vast majority of people traveling on our roadways don't have a clue when they're passing from the unincorporated county to City of Tucson, to Oro Valley, to Marana, to ADOT. We all have to work together. And so having a similar look and approach to how we're going to build these improvements is very important. And then we have Irvington. This would be a new roadway. So Irvington right now does not connect over to Ajo Highway. This would provide, it's only a short segment to the west side that doesn't connect right now, but we would be improving the entire roadway and providing that new connection, which would be an important additional east-west connection in this southwest area.
Right, thank you.
One
Go ahead.
quick question. When you said Valencia is the top priority, do you mean of all of them or of the southwest sub area?
In the southwest sub area, and I would say in general, that is a focus project. And just to share, we have collected a lot of impact fees due to the growth in that area, and we'll be starting a design effort even before we know any outcomes of RTA Next. We will be following a federal process so that we can be competitive, hopefully on future federal grant opportunities. But this is another area where it's already developed on the north and the south. So it's a very costly improvement when we're going through this area. And it would be an opportunity to really use multiple types of funding, leverage all the funding to get the best project for this area.
Catherine, on Drexel, have you had conversations to coordinate that project or that ask with the city of Tucson?
I have not been in those conversations in detail, though I know at the TMC workshop, there was a lot of conversation in that breakout group, which I was not a part of, talking about the various improvements needed in that area. So I would anticipate we would continue to do that once we have better direction.
Yeah, those several projects that the city had on Drexel were very high priority for them, and it's good to see that connection here as far as priorities go. All right, next slide.
Oh, we're in the Pasquayaki. Does that mean I finished all of mine?
Very good.
Okay, well, I will just leave you, I really appreciate the conversation. I think it's really important, as I've heard you guys saying, flexibility, adaptability. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 20 years. And I will say Palo Verde is a high priority for us as well. We'd love to see that back on the roadway list.
Just when you were talking about about all-weather access, were you suggesting there be a category for all-weather access?
I was, yes. So if you guys have not seen, there was an original memo to the board and letter from Mr. Huckleberry, who was the county administrator at the time, that outlined what our vision would be for an RTA Next. And we saw the all-weather improvements as well as the pavement maintenance kind of being natural partners in terms of, providing that continuous funding to keep up and do these spot improvements to keep it'll spread wider throughout the entire network. So we kind of paired those two together.
I'm just not sure if everybody saw that. So, but I will ask you this one too, then. The county has suggested that technology be its own category or name something like technology.
That's correct. I believe last time it was grouped in with some more of signal expansion. And, I think it's much more far reaching than that, and has a lot more possibilities than just signals.
Bruce?
I'd just like to follow up. I was going to ask the same question. I've sort of been beating the technology thing to death here at the committee, but prior to the pandemic, there had been conversations with both the city and the county about how to approach the technology issue and what was the best paradigm for doing that. And there seem to be two different approaches, one from the county, one from the city. So I'm kind of unclear about, what the suggestion is in terms about how to deal with technology. I know there's the notion of building technology into road projects, but would the county also consider a set aside for technology that can't be anticipated now, but might come into play later on? Or it would just be really helpful to have a better understanding what the city and the county are talking about in terms of technology.
That's a great question, and I don't have a direct answer for that right now. I will say that the city and the county are both together founding members in the U of A Center for Applied Transportation Sciences that is really digging into the possibilities of technology and how can we use it to make better decisions, both from data analytics of what's happening on our roadways now, but what are the possibilities in terms of technology looking in the future. We held a symposium a month ago, where we brought in Houston, who had received a very large federal grant back in 2016. They started doing the implementation in 2019. Of course, that went a little sideways with the pandemic, but that was really looking at bringing in mobility on demand in earnest through an app where you had functionality when it comes to carpooling or route shift or transit, all of these things that, I can't say with confidence what's going to happen in the next 10 years, but I know that the utility that's provided when you have a level of confidence that you hold in your pocket on how these things work, you may get more utility and use and offset some of those single occupancy vehicles. So I think investment has to be made in that area, but it's so emerging. And to my point earlier, this is where we have opportunities because there are so few members in PAG. There's a lot fewer people at the table trying to coordinate these matters. When you're doing it in Houston, they number in the hundreds of jurisdictions and they have 3 counties. So, there may be opportunity there.
Great, thank you. And this will obviously be a future topic that we'll delve into. Thank you, Catherine. Greatly appreciate it. Mel, do you have a quickie?
I do.
Thank you.
Catherine, thank you for your presentation. I thought it was terrific on roads. If budget were not considerations, what are the best transit projects you would recommend we as a community look at? And secondly, what resources, can you make a list of resources that are available locally to act as a think tank to help our planning?
Well, off the top of my head, I'm not able to rank transit projects. However, I will say that through PAG, there was a long-range transit study done just a couple years ago. And I think that that's really a good starting point to kind of thinking about what the possibilities are. And then in terms of a think tank, I can get back to you. I mean, there's so many different working groups. We at the county, sit on lots of different committees and each one is kind of its own little think tank. But I mentioned the CATS. That's a really good working group to have conversations in, but I'll give it some more thought and get back through Mr. McGovern.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Really appreciate you being here and helping us understand your priorities. Thanks so much. Okay, and Pascua Yaqui Tribe is here. Wanted to welcome Artemio Hoyos and Jason Bahi to tell us about what's going on with the PY.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Artemio Hoyos. I'm the Economic and Community Development Division Director, and I serve on the management committee levels for PAG and RTA. And as a small jurisdiction, we don't have a transportation department, but we do have a facilities management department, and we're fortunate to have a construction manager who specializes in transportation. So I'll introduce Jason Bahi, and he'll present the projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the CAC. And I just want to sideline a little bit and wish Kevin a happy birthday.
That's right. Happy birthday, Kevin.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to sit in on the September TMC meeting to whittle the projects down because I came down with COVID. So, but I'm here today. Just wanted to do a little follow-up on Artemio's introduction. I worked for Pima County for 31 years, as a lot of you know already, and I took on this opportunity with the tribe, and just to help the Native community. I'm Navajo, but it's an honor to work for fellow natives here in our region. So, but with that, just wanted to make a request real quick. Would you please bring up Google Maps and show a map of the reservation down south of Valencia? Just wanted to, if you'd also bring up the aerial photo as well. It has a lot to do with the roads, the projects that we have on the list. So we have two projects that have been prioritized at the September meeting. One is Camino de Oeste from Calle Torum north to Valencia Road. And then the other project being Los Reales from Sheridan / Ignacio Bomea to Camino de Oeste. I don't know if you're able to bring up an aerial photo.
I'll get there in 1 sec. Sorry.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. The reason why I'm asking for an aerial photograph of the area of the project areas is I want to emphasize the location of the black wash relative to the two projects. And the black wash, when it floods, it pretty much cuts off access to the entire reservation. So the black wash cuts off Camino de Oeste and then also Los Reales and pretty much isolates the entire reservation. And the administration building, our non-emergency health facilities are all located there. There are residential housing that the tribe has put there, and then also the educational facilities that the tribe has in place. Camino de Oeste right now, when it floods, when the black wash floods, becomes impassable. It doesn't. You can't get emergency vehicles in and out of the reservation. So still trying to, if you zoom in on Camino de Oeste from, there you go, okay. So
Could you point with the cursor to when we're talking about
okay,
projects?
so where the cursor is now, that's the black wash, and the north-south street there that you see is Camino de Oeste, and then Los Reales is the street that intersects Camino de Oeste right there, just at the intersection of Camino de Oeste. So Los Reales would, the project limits for Camino de Oeste extends from Calle Torum north to Valencia, and then also for Los Reales, it would run from Ignacio Bomea to back towards Camino de Oeste. The projects would make both roadways all weather accessible, and it would help as far as being able to bring emergency vehicles on and off the reservation. Both road projects are the primary access routes to county and city roadways, and it would also tie in with the county's proposed project that that Catherine touched on just recently, where they were looking to widen Valencia from Community Del Oeste to Mission Road. The tribe is working actively on applying for other funding sources as well, to fund a portion of the projects or increments or parts of the project as well. So we only receive a little over $1 million a year for roadway projects from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so it'd be very difficult. I'd have to squirrel away money for years just to be able to build a project of this scale. So, with that, I'll take on any questions if you have any.
How much do you expect how much income do you expect from RTA Next? And this is about 20 million? Just 20 million?
Approximately, yeah, as of today, yes.
Yes. What would you think would come in from RTA Next, income wise? Or what percentage do you get?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
So RTA Next passes, how much money does the Pascoyaki area receive?
I'm not sure. Do you know, Artemio?
Us, right? Depends on what the voters approve. It depends on what the voters approve.
So if we maintain the half-cent sales tax increase, so like what would they? How short are they from the 20 million? Like what does this look like for them?
Haven't voted on projects.
No, but if this is the project, what would come in? Would this cover this? Or are they still far away from it? Or I'm just trying to get a scope, a pragmatic scope.
I think the request is that the RTA fund these projects so that 20 million of the RTA's 2 billion be set aside for these two projects.
Okay.
Yeah. So these would show up as major name projects on the ballot, and if approved, would be fully funded through RTA.
All right.
Okay.
Chair, if I may clarify, if I understand the question, there is no allocation of funding to any jurisdiction. You all make a recommendation to the board will approve that allocation.
And I know there's going to be some conversation from time to time about how much does each jurisdiction get out of what we're doing. And I'd tell you that we shouldn't even do that. We should just try to get most important projects, the ones that are regionally make the most sense. And then when we have a full plan put together, take a look at that and see where we are, see how fair it is, because some of the projects are going to show up. Many of the projects are going to be in these different categoricals, and will end up, being in specific jurisdictions, whereas they may have little or none in the name project. So we want to make sure that we're not getting caught trying to micromanage the allocation of these funds by jurisdiction, but rather do the best we can as a representative group to come up with projects that make sense overall for a plan. And then we'll certainly test it and check it and see where we are. Dale.
And I'll just throw out here, I mean, the word social equity has been thrown around here quite a bit. And if you want to talk about, as someone who's done audits on Indian tribes and et cetera, these potentially are social equity projects beyond anything else. So, I'm not sure that these are projects where how much is this community going to contribute is at the top of the list.
Right.
I just wanted to make one other point. We have these portion of this project is shovel ready. So we have plans that we've developed to widen Camino de Oeste from Cayetoram to Los Reales, and then Los Reales from Ignacio to Camino de Oeste as well. So with that, with that information in hand, we're like I said, we're applying for grants through the bill grant. And
Infrastructure
so,
bill, yeah.
you know, hopefully we'll get some of those funds and, you know, we might be able to shorten a portions of the request that we have before you.
Thank you, Jason. Comment from Rachel.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to point out how this is ideal. It's regional because, as was explained, when there's flooding, the Pascua Yaqui community is completely cut off from other communities. Therefore, it's very clearly regional. And even though their requests are very modest, they're looking elsewhere for funding. I mean, I just want to give you a gold star. It's just exactly what, you know, all the community should be doing.
Right on. Thank you, Rachel. And Jason and Artemio, do you want to add some more?
And I just wanted to make a clarification that I made at the workshop is that the tribes portion is just from Los Reales to Thorim. So from Los Reales to Valencia, that's Pima County. And then we talked about, you know, just funding and just being realistic. You know, I think it calls for 4 lanes, but the shovel ready project that we have is actually just widening to 3 lanes from Los Reales to Calle Thorim. So that big section up there, it is not part of what the tribe would develop. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you both for being here today. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, and Josh has some specific information for us regarding our rating tool that the working group developed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. We have 9 minutes to touch on what's going on with the DAC.
Just to clarify, we'll take whatever time we need.
Okay. We have a focused amount of time to cover the CAC evaluation overview. There's been a series of 3 meetings with the work group, and so just kind of want to share some of that where we are. Let's get to the next one, probably. Okay, you all have received emails from Pocky dating back to October 14th, requesting your individual review of the projects. So this isn't kind of an open exercise right now that we've asked you to kind of go in and look at each project and identify whether it's a high, medium, or low priority. Those individual results will be combined to display which projects were most frequently prioritized as high, medium, or low priority as a group. So we're going to take your individual perspective and then bring it all together so you can kind of see where the group is with those individual priorities. Additionally, the results can be compared against the TMC high priority list from their workshop to identify commonalities. One thing to note, Director Skinner with Pima County mentioned that they had submitted their priority list initially, and then they kind of went back and revisited based on a number of additional safety and equity measures. That priority ranking in the platform of that second iteration, that's what you're seeing. So when you go in there and you see jurisdiction priority for the Pima County projects, it reflects their most recent ranking exercise. So that information, that's kind of where we are right now. With the work group, the RTA Next Project Evaluation Tool work group, we've kind of are at a point in which we can come back to the broader group here, and I'll just kind of step through. The CAC Project Evaluation Work Group adopted metrics for ranking the RTA Next submitted projects. This additional effort will complement the previous exercise. For each of the CAC goals, a project can get up to 10 points based on the opportunity to make a positive impact for that goal area for a max score of 100 points. The work group aligned the CAC goals with data-driven performance measures where available. Through that effort, we identified up to 75 points will be assigned based on performance measured data. So kind of what we're bringing to you all today is the additional 25 points require input from individual CAC members on how well they believe each project can make an improvement towards a goal. Once CAC members have stepped through the CAC, this additional scoring process, the individual values will be averaged and integrated into that overall evaluation score. We're asking for you all to wrap up this assignment by noon this Friday. Yeah. So there's some work to do on that. I'll go through now and kind of show you. We will open this up this afternoon, but we want to give you an orientation. So this is a screen grab of the portal, and to the left of the color-coded grid on the right, you see a new the column in purple, highlighted in purple, is a new column that we've added to facilitate this exercise. So CAC member score is a new column. We're asking you basically, by default, for everybody individually, similar to the last exercise, it's going to show up as needed. Your individual member score is needed. Click on that needed hyperlink and it'll give you a pop-up. We received a decent amount of feedback in this last exercise, like, how do I know when I'm done? Great question. So we added that purple highlight down at the bottom is another label, and it gives you kind of a counting total of how many you've already done and how many are needed. So it says CAC goal review needed. In this screen grab, I've stepped through 6 of them, so it's showing that I still need to do 102. When I get to 108, it'll turn green. So that's just an indication that you've completed the exercise for all of the projects.
Josh, yeah, I wanted to just have you give us a quick clarification of something you've already said. Could you scroll over, scroll left to the scores, the 3 scoring columns that are on the other side of these colored boxes?
Yeah, it's a screen grab. I'll step into a live demo in a second.
That's okay. So there are scores showing here, and those are the 75-point scores.
Those are not. Those are
from the RMAP.
Those are from the RMAP. I'm sorry. Yes, those are the RMAP scores. We will have that 70 point. We're still finalizing that assessment, so we'll have that once this exercise is complete.
Okay.
So that we'll be able to bring them together.
To follow up on that, I have mine open right now, and I have the member priority, like the low, medium, high, but I don't see that.
It doesn't.
Once we've given this orientation, we'll open up that functionality.
Okay, and then the other question, that's what I thought I just heard, but I wasn't sure because you were saying some of you did it. But you started out talking about the high priority TMC, the priorities, and you're talking about the column that just has a yes or a no, not a high or medium or low. So it's being a priority means it's a high priority, or no means it's not their priority.
There are a couple of things going on. The TMC priority column that you see here, where it's yes or no, that is the results from the workshop, the TMC workshop. The sponsor rank, and I'm sorry, I used the wrong term.
Thank you.
The sponsor rank is where the individual jurisdiction has submitted their, so you'll see a number of number ones if you were to sort it that way. And so that was a reference to the county's new ranking exercise based on equity. That's reflected in that rank.
Okay.
The one I mentioned was the CAC priority exercise, where we've asked you all, and that's in that CAC member priority column there.
I have a question.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
Go right ahead.
So when you click on that CAC member score needed link, it'll give you this pop-up. And so there are 25 points that we are asking the individual CAC members to step through each project and assign. And so what we've done here is we've given you the project level details of the project name, location, description, detailed description. You can always click out of this and go into that project detail report, but we wanted to give you what we felt was the most actionable information regarding this task in the same pop-up. You also have existing lanes before and after and total length. That second half of that pop-up, we asked, please provide your input on how well this project responds to the following CAC goals for a maximum of 25 points. The first two goals are individual goals, and there's 10 points each. And then the last one, the work group identified there's kind of a data component to it, and then this kind of qualitative group assessment that we wanted. So that's why that one's only available. 5 points are only available for that third.
Yeah, 5 points have been previously decided, at least by the working group, that we had performance measures that we could utilize to evaluate those objectively.
Correct. And so we ask you to step through that process this week and provide that input. And those results will be integrated and contribute to that overall project assessment, the overall evaluation score for a total of up to 100 points.
Bruce.
I have a question. So in light of today's discussion,
yes, I
I want to go back and revisit some of the high, low, and mediums. Am I still allowed to do that, or have those been?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a great question. And as you can go back to your CAC member priority and revise those. You can also, once it's completed, you can still go back into that pop-up and change it. There's going to be a point where we're going to have to stop like these changes. We're asking you all to focus some energy this week because we are trying to prepare materials for the upcoming meetings. But yeah, for the time being, yes, but please try to get your final edits in soon.
And what we're not seeing here, but you have the scores that the committee put together already in another column, the 75-point scores.
We're still working on that, and we'll have that lined up. We'll have that ready for our next interaction.
Yeah, Josh, we do need to walk through those individual goals and what the committee is recommending to the full committee, what the working group is recommending to the full committee to have completed by Friday.
Understood.
So are we able to do that today?
Today was going to be this high level overview that there's 75 points that's been assigned through the PM data driven exercise and the 25-point exercise that we're asking you all to kind of step through right now.
Okay. Can you, was that live?
I can
that
jump
one.
into
So
live.
can you
now.
do an,
Sorry.
no, I meant, what I meant was
Crystal can help me go live.
in your demonstration, were you able to actually open up either of those three specific, the 10, 10 and the 5 to show committee what's inside there and what they'd be asked to choose from?
Yes.
Because it wasn't clear that they were either all or nothing, 10 or 0 were the only choices, or that it was anywhere from 0 to 10. Or if there was a 0, a 5 and a 10, you know,
Right.
those sorts of things that the working group spent a lot of time debating.
So, sorry, the mouse control is a little sensitive here. So it's a 0 to 10, essentially, a 0 where you can select any point along this, any number along this range for the first two, and then for the last one, it's 0 to 5. Similarly, you can select 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And 0.
And in some of the ones that are set, that were set by the working group as objective, that is that we can evaluate them based on the metrics that are available, the performance measures that we have access to. Some of those were 0, 5, or 10, rather than, requiring some sort of subjective feeling on the part of a rater as to whether it's a 7 or an 8, as an example, or if it's a 2 or a 7.
Correct.
Those are pretty well defined by, exactly what the measure was.
Correct.
That's what I want the full committee to be cognizant of, however it is that we can get that information to them.
Mr. Chair, we can probably follow up with an email and put that additional information out there, but again, we hope that if you go through this exercise, and then we can come back with the report and then collectively show what the scores come up with.
Yeah, definitely. But as we promised the full committee, the working group, representing you, develop these proposed metrics, and that's what we'll be using. But we'll also want feedback to make sure that that we haven't missed the mark tremendously. That I have no doubt that this will help us tremendously, but I just want to make that clear.
And there was a decent amount of discussion. There were at least 2 hour long, 3 2 hour long meetings where an orientation on kind of the state of the practices with state ADOT has stepped through this kind of performance driven exercise, data driven exercise, where they open it up to allow for this kind of qualitative assessment through staff, but here we're opening it up to a committee. Through the RMAP exercise, regionally, we stepped through this kind of data-driven effort, and City of Tucson, Move Tucson also stepped through this type of performance-driven exercise. So this is what you're seeing right now, a way to kind of quantify some of the more qualitative goals that were expressed that we didn't have that data at our fingertips. And wanting to kind of get the group's input and buy-in and see where the group lands on these.
Yeah, this is the working group's suggestion of the best way to handle some of those. As you recall, there was a lot of advice, I guess, that we received from both the TMC and members of the board that if it can't be measured, it can't be. It shouldn't be considered a goal. This is our effort to measure these based on information that we have available in these. You want to remind us, Josh, about how to get detailed information about what these projects are about?
Yeah.
So that if you're not really familiar with it, we'll remind you how to go into the data that backs up each of these lines.
Yeah, so this is under the total cost column. You have the core application that the jurisdictional partner submitted. It starts out with this general data where you get the project name, location, description, detailed description, number of lanes before and after. That's what we've shared in that pop-up, so you don't have to click through so many screens just for one individual project. You could then scroll down and see where their cost estimates are coming from, and any additional information they may have shared. But the kind of core pieces are up top that describe what that project is. And we took a couple of steps to make sure that if this is going to be the same information that you will then see when you click on that CAC member score needed hyperlink, where this is so tricky, where then this pop-up will give you that information, and it's giving me a hard time right now. It'll give you that information. Let me just I will.
No problem. I think that answered the question that I had, and I wanted to make sure that the committee was aware that information is right there at your fingertips.
Yeah, we will fix that and make sure you don't encounter that. But if you ever encounter something like that, a refresh of the site usually covers it for you. So just hit that refresh up here. I'll get that fixed before this rolls out. But this is a Pima County one where the high level general information details are provided. And then we give you that goal. We ask where 10 is maximum improvement and 0 is minimum improvement. Tell us what it looks like. I went in and I just made up a bunch of numbers to make sure it stayed to those values. Please don't consider these my actual assessment or influence your assessment.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Go
Chair,
ahead.
just a request again. I know majority of members have already gone in, but if you have any technical challenges, any questions, please do reach out to Poppy or Josh. And we'll be happy to walk you through it.
Very much so.
Do you have an idea when this is going to be available?
I'm gonna check why that click wasn't working, but momentarily. We just need to make it live for your user rules. So this afternoon.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Josh, okay, or?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, good. Ava?
Yes, as a member of the tools subcommittee, I just want to make clear that there are a number of priorities and goals that we were not able to reflect through the tool based on data sets or other limitations. I was wondering, Josh, if you, Mr. Chair, if it is Josh who should be presenting on this, but when he does the deep dive into the tool, if he could also present on us all of the goals and priorities that were not really able to be integrated. Like I think we were having trouble integrating equity data, ADA performance. I know there are some major shortcomings with the tool, and I just would like us to be really transparent about what those are, while maintaining that, quite a bit of work went into this, and I really commend Josh for everything he did to, to create this kind of monstrosity. It really is quite impressive, but it does have major shortcomings, and I want to say that I, for one, did not want to hold up our process because there are very few projects that are going to float to the top per se. Holding up the equity tool development based on it not being perfect is not necessarily going to help us that much anyway. In that same vein, I'd like to ask why we are being requested to rank 100+ projects when there will be so very few that float to the top. As we know from today, where Oro Valley just presented their jurisdiction projects to us, and they whittled theirs down to just 3. So it seems like a waste of time. We also have determined that we still don't have a full list. It makes me a little bit nervous to be doing rankings when we don't have a full list of projects. And also we haven't seen the presentations from all jurisdictions, and that makes a really big difference today. We really, it came into sharp perspective how important, these projects are that are, meant to overcome how the flooding of a wash cuts off a community completely. I don't know that we would have understood that totally without that project. So I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse a bit, and would like to get more, have more conversation on how we're rolling out our activities here.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I'll just touch on a couple of those items. It's at your pleasure. I think based on some of the feedback we received, everybody wanted to continue to keep the entire 108 in the mix. But then again, you already have the perspective from individual jurisdictions. You have the perspective from TMC. So that's at your pleasure if you want to do all of them or just do the ones that are prioritized previously. So we kind of want to make sure that we don't restrict that. That's your choice. Do all 108 if you like. And then in addition to that, all the jurisdictions were invited to present, and they all have. Unfortunately, the city of Tucson was the only one that, city of South Tucson was the only one that was not able to present. And we hope that at some point they'll come back and present. But you've already received everybody's presentation. You have their priority list. It's in your packet, and we hope that you reference all those. You reference the priority list, you reference the TMC's workshop, and your own understanding of the projects. So we believe we're at a point that we can move forward with that process. And again, this is an ongoing process. So once you stop and take a look at it, then you can go back and make changes again as many times as you like.
Yeah, let me follow up on the question of the 108 projects. Josh, if for instance, you only want to look at the TMC priorities, the yeses, in other words, as I did, and then add 2 or 3 other projects that were not recommended, but which I personally thought were important and should be further considered. What would happen to the ones I didn't rank? Would they just get zeros by default?
They are not going
Which would
to
be okay with me. I just want to tell the committee we should all kind of approach it the same way.
Right. They're not going to be considered in the averaging of the priority assignment.
So if you don't rank it, it won't be averaged.
Correct. It won't be considered in the group of responses.
Okay.
So
definition is 0.
By definition, it's worse than 0. It's does not exist.
Yeah. And so mechanically, I don't know if folks caught what as Tom was describing, where he wanted to just look at the TMC priorities. You could go to this TMC priority filter. So these drop downs up here are filters of this record set down below. And then on the left-hand side at the bottom, it shows by default, you have 108 projects. When I selected TMC priority equals yes, it did a subset down to 63 or whatever that number is, the subset from that exercise. And so you could just focus in on that. But as you mentioned, you may want to look at beyond what was recommended out of that workshop. So you could sort this list by clicking on that top header and make sure all the yeses are at top, and then scroll down to see, well, what, where do the no's begin? They begin in the 60s here. Hold on. So these are some that I got there. Sorry. So then you can start looking at the ones that didn't come into play from that. And if you could just filter on, well, of the TMC priorities equal no, you could just look at that subset as well and see and start sorting and looking at jurisdiction priorities or some of these other existing PMs that we have. So that's a way this grid, this tool can be used. If you're having a very hard time with this spreadsheet, with this website, you can download this information to Excel if you feel more comfortable. But ultimately, we're going to need your input in this platform so we can collate all the information.
Right. Okay, Bruce.
So mine's kind of a follow-up to this, and not to get too much into the weeds, but I went through the projects first and did my own rankings. Then I compared them to the jurisdictional priorities because we had the input of their, certainly through the day. And then I compared it to the TMC. When I got through, by and large, they lined up, but there were 6 or 7 or 8 projects that my projects didn't align with what the TMC. We've not had the opportunity to have them come in and talk to us about how they set those priorities. They're the professionals. I would very much benefit from being able to ask questions about those 5 or 6 or 8 projects that didn't align with the TMC. I don't know if other committee members would see that need, but it'd be very helpful for me to understand how they arrived at their decision and where I might be wrong or right or whatever. So I don't know if that's a possibility or not. John Burnell or somebody could come in and go through those with us.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I just want to ask a clarification question. So the individual jurisdictions felt that they presented under priorities. Are you suggesting someone other than those individual jurisdictions?
Well, I'm saying that the members of the TMC as a committee through their workshop came up with this list. And after I did all that, there were 7 or 8 projects that were no from the TMC, but yes for me. I couldn't ferret out the issues that resulted in the difference between my perspective and their perspective. And I thought it'd be really helpful to have the professionals give their insights into why they view this as a significant regional corridor or not.
Right, but follow on that, but who do you recommend other than the individuals who presented? Is there someone else who can answer?
Well, I don't know if
that question?
somebody could summarize how the committee came to the workshop
I
to that judgment or that decision.
I think it was very collaborative and consensus based, but we'll work on that with the two TMC liaisons and see how we can
I
respond.
understand it's complex, but can't be done. I understand.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, I can't see the hands up right now, but I think Patricia had her hand up.
Yeah, I did. Thanks. One quick clarification on what y'all were just talking about a second ago. So if some of us are going to be filtering and only ranking the projects that are TMC approved or that we've heard from in presentations, and then others will not be doing that, but then we're getting an average regardless. So does that mean that if one project that maybe a jurisdiction has decided to deprioritize, a couple people do rank it and they rank it highly, it's going to be presented as though the committee's pleasure was that it was ranked highly? Is that what I'm understanding?
So there's, we're looking at bringing a composite in. And one of the ways in which we're looking at doing that is essentially assigning some points to each one. So where a highly ranked project would get 3 points, a medium ranked project, priority project would get 2, and a low ranked project would get 1. So the number of, if there are only 2 people that rank that project as high, then it's going to get 6 points, so it's going to come down. But if there were 10 people that ranked that another project as high, that would get 30 points. And so we'd be kind of pulling that together in a way that kind of helps see. So that's kind of the next step of the exercise. So if you want to identify your priorities, it's as we bring these results in front of the group, you'll get to see what that impact is looking like. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I appreciate that. Didn't quite understand. And then in general, a broader question, I think maybe I'd be interested to hear from other CAC members about reactions to this tool being the evaluation subcommittee's product, and how well it suits their goals in sort of completing this ranking task. I was part of that subcommittee, and I still have a few lingering questions as to why we didn't integrate other data sets or approaches that other cities and authorities have successfully incorporated. Particularly, I think there's a few ways that we could approach equity, which are definitely measurable, that we didn't move to do. And then looking through, I know we haven't gotten deep into it and how it looks, to actually be completing the ranking exercise, but looking through it, it kind of seems like we're being expected to sort of infer what the existing situation of a project site, and then what the desired outcome would be. And I personally, and I think probably a lot of other members, don't know every single area of this region well enough to be able to decide oh yes, that would be an improvement in equity or things like that. So maybe, I don't know if it means an extension in the ranking or, just having some conversation about this process, but I would love to hear from CAC members, as Tom mentioned, their thoughts about the tool before, we're all expected to use it. And, that
So-
feedback will have come after we've completed the rankings.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Patricia. I think the best way for us to proceed at this point is to go through the tool that has now been compiled. We will get an email with detailed information about how the tool came to be and each of those items and what data sets were used. I heard a request for those goals that could not be itemized, or for which it logistically wasn't, we weren't able to do that. And in other words, kind of background to the tool being presented. Use it, and at our next meeting, when we have those results, and before we even launch into those results, we'll have a chance for some feedback about the tool, how it worked for you, and kind of your reaction to it. the limitations that people have described, and, you know, kind of how we can use it best.
And Tom, if I can jump in addressing Eva's comment as well. These are the goals where we were unable to identify good data sources. And we felt that this required more qualitative assessment from a committee member.
Right, and we
So-
felt
so
that they shouldn't be lost. They shouldn't be disregarded because we didn't have the complete data sets to support ranking of them, but rather to allow the individuals within the committee to kind of attach their own values to those. And they represent about a quarter of all the points available, as you saw, 25 out of 100.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Bruce actually described the next step in the process, which is that alignment. So we're hoping that once we have all this information, we go exactly to what Bruce, you did, to look at alignment and then have that conversation.
And that was another big point of the work, the 6 hours discussing this tool set and what it is and what it isn't. It gives you a number. It's a data-driven exercise, not a data dictated exercise. It is a point of reference. It's not the end all be all. So it'll be something that can help inform the dialogue moving forward.
Okay, all right. Unfortunately, we are.
Hey, Tom, I've had my hand up for quite a bit and I have some comments.
Yeah, I apologize, but just a second ago, we lost the quorum for our meeting, so we're not able to continue our conversation. Hold that for us, Moss, and we'll hit it at our next meeting. Everybody, please do as we've been talking about here. Josh, thank you for getting that, and we look forward to the further information that you're going to provide to us. But given that we are no longer constituting a full committee for quorum purposes, we will now adjourn and